Hello, and welcome to the channel. I'm glad you're here, and I truly appreciate you listening today. If you enjoy the stories, please consider liking this video and subscribing for more. Viewer discretion is advised. Now, let's settle in and enjoy today's stories. I've always been the type of person who's curious about things I probably shouldn't be. It's not just a bad habit, it's like an itch I have to scratch. That's how I found myself on a quiet Tuesday night, browsing the dark web out of sheer boredom. It started innocently enough, skimming through the bizarre listings. Old military equipment, ancient coins, obscure documents. Nothing caught my eye until I stumbled on a hidden auction. It wasn't much different from the rest, selling strange, forgotten things. But the photos were old and grainy, and the atmosphere felt off. The items listed were the kind of things you'd find at a junkyard: a rusted pocket watch, a cracked mirror, some faded postcards. But then I saw the camera, a vintage Polaroid 600, the kind people collected for the aesthetic. The listing was simple: vintage camera with unique properties. No details, no background story, nothing. It felt mysterious, and maybe that's why I bid on it. I thought it would make for a cool display piece. I wasn't expecting it to be functional. The price was low enough that I didn't think twice. I placed the bid. A week later, a plain brown package showed up on my doorstep. There it was, the camera. It looked older than I expected. The leather strap was cracked, and the lens was smudged with dust. Whoever owned it before hadn't cared for it, but it still had that strange allure. I almost put it on my shelf right then, but something in me said to try it out. I shouldn't have. That first night, after staring at the camera for a while, I decided to test it. The film that came with it looked old, like it had been sitting in someone's attic for decades. Still, I loaded it into the camera and pointed it at the window in my living room. Nothing special, just the view of my street, the dull glow of streetlights and shadows of trees. I pressed the shutter. There was the familiar whir as the photo developed, the sound somehow echoing in the quiet room. When I pulled out the photo and shook it, the image that appeared wasn't my window. It wasn't even my living room. The picture showed a hallway, long and narrow, with cracked walls and dim lighting. At the end of the hall was a door, barely visible in the darkness. My stomach tightened, and a cold sweat formed on the back of my neck. This wasn't a random malfunction. The hallway looked too real, like a place that existed, somewhere. I convinced myself it was just a glitch. Maybe the old film was corrupted, or the camera had some built-in trick to show creepy images. I put the photo on the coffee table and went to bed, determined to forget about it. But I couldn't shake the feeling that the hallway wasn't just a random image. The next day, I tried to push the strange picture out of my mind. I had to. But that night, the camera called to me again. I don't know how to explain it. Just this weird compulsion to take another photo, like I needed to see if it would happen again. I pointed it at my bedroom door, this time. Click. The whir of the photo developing sent a chill through me, like the sound itself was wrong. As I held the picture in my hand, the image came into focus, and my stomach dropped. The same hallway. But this time, something had changed. The door at the end of the hallway was slightly open. I stared at the photo for what felt like hours, my heart racing. It was as if the camera was showing me something I wasn't supposed to see. The room felt colder, my skin prickling with unease. It wasn't just a glitch. The camera was leading me somewhere. I tossed the photo aside, closed the camera in the drawer, and promised myself I wouldn't touch it again. But that night, I dreamed of the hallway. I woke up in a cold sweat, the dream still fresh in my mind. The hallway, the door, the sense of something waiting for me on the other side. My hand shook as I wiped the sweat from my forehead, trying to steady my breathing. Then I heard it, the sound of a camera shutter. My heart nearly stopped. It was unmistakable, the click, followed by the mechanical whir of the camera developing a photo. I lay there, frozen, trying to convince myself it was my imagination. But then it happened again. The sound was coming from the living room. My hands were trembling as I made my way down the hall. The house was dark, but the camera was on the coffee table, pointed directly at me. A fresh photo was sticking out of the slot. I hadn't touched it since putting it away. I hesitated before picking up the photo, terrified of what I'd see. When the image came into focus, my breath caught in my throat. It was a picture of me, standing in that same hallway, staring at the open door. But this time, there was something behind me. A figure, tall and thin, its face obscured in shadow. It was watching me. The figure in the photo haunted me. I couldn't stop thinking about it. Its shape burned into my mind. Over the next few days, I started seeing it, out of the corner of my eye, in the shadows behind me, when I turned on the lights. Always just a flicker, gone as soon as I tried to focus. At first I thought I was losing it. Maybe the stress was getting to me, or maybe the camera was messing with my head. But the sightings became more frequent, more real. Every time I caught a glimpse of it, the feeling of dread grew. I tried to destroy the camera. I threw it in the trash, smashed it with a hammer, even tried burning it. But no matter what I did, it always reappeared. On my desk, on the kitchen counter, once even at the foot of my bed. I couldn't escape it. It was only after the third attempt to get rid of the camera that I realized the hallway in the photos was real. I recognized it from somewhere, though I couldn't place it at first. Then, one day, while walking through the older part of town, I saw it. A building I'd passed dozens of times, but never really noticed. There it was, the entrance to the hallway from the photos, a place I'd never been, but somehow knew too well. I stood outside the building for what felt like hours, staring at the entrance. My mind raced with possibilities, but none of them made sense. Why had the camera shown me this place? What was waiting behind the door? Against every instinct screaming at me to leave, I went inside. The hallway was exactly as it had appeared in the photos, narrow, with cracked walls and dim lighting. Every step I took felt like I was being watched. The air was thick, oppressive, like it was pushing me toward the door at the end. The door was slightly ajar, just like in the last photo. My heart pounded in my chest as I approached, and every fiber of my being told me to turn around. But I couldn't stop. I had to know what was behind that door. As I reached for the handle, I felt a cold breath on the back of my neck. I spun around, but there was no one there, just the hallway, stretching out behind me. I turned back to the door and pulled it open. The room beyond the door was small, barely bigger than a closet. It was empty, except for a single chair in the center of the room, and a strange, heavy feeling that made my skin crawl. I stepped inside, and the door slammed shut behind me. The figure from the photos was there, standing in the corner, its hollow eyes locked on me. It didn't move, didn't make a sound, but I could feel it pulling me in, draining the air from the room. I backed up, slamming into the wall, but there was no escape. My chest tightened as my vision blurred. The world spun, and everything went dark. When I woke up, I was back in my living room, the camera resting on my lap, a new photo in front of me. My hands trembled as I picked it up. It was a picture of the small room, the figure standing over me, its hand outstretched, reaching for my throat. I've tried everything to get rid of the camera, but it always comes back. The figure is closer now, each time it appears in the photos. I see it more often in real life too, behind doors, at the edge of mirrors, always watching. I don't know how long I have left. The last photo I took shows me standing at the edge of the hallway, the door wide open, and the figure right behind me. I know what's coming. The camera can't be destroyed, and neither can the figure. All I can do now is wait, and hope that when it finally comes for me, it'll be quick. It started the way these things always do, with boredom and a bad idea. Late one night, after scrolling endlessly through social media and video games losing their appeal, I found myself back on the dark web. I wasn't looking for anything in particular, just browsing. I've been down this road before, but I never bought anything more than random trinkets, old electronics, vintage watches, nothing serious. But that night, I found a new listing that caught my eye. "Get anything you want, no questions asked," was the headline. Beneath it, a brief description. Custom orders, items of all kinds, delivery within days. It was vague, but the intrigue was enough to pull me in. The seller's page looked legit, with an impressive number of 5-star ratings. No complaints. The concept felt too good to be true, but curiosity pushed me forward. I clicked buy on a whim, then filled in a form asking what I wanted. I decided to keep it simple. Surprise me. I paid in Bitcoin, a faceless transaction, and closed my laptop. It didn't take long for regret to settle in. What the hell had I just done? The whole thing felt wrong, but what was the worst that could happen? A scam? A junk item I didn't want? I tried to forget about it, but the next morning, the countdown began. 3 days later, a small, unmarked package appeared on my doorstep. No return address, no tracking information, just my name, written in neat block letters. My heart raced when I saw it, a knot of anxiety twisting in my stomach. I hadn't told anyone about the order. How did they know my real name? I was sure I'd only given my username, never my real address. I took the box inside and set it on the kitchen table, staring at it as if it might explode. It was light, too light. I debated whether to even open it, but curiosity won out. I grabbed a knife and slit the tape. Inside was a small, black envelope. Simple, no logo, no markings. I hesitated before opening it, and when I did, I found a single sheet of paper folded neatly inside. The words, typed in clean, precise font, were chilling. "We know what you want." There was no item, no surprise, just that note. My skin prickled as I read it again. What did it mean? Was it a sick joke? I tossed the envelope into the trash and tried to brush off the unease creeping over me. But that night, I couldn't sleep. My mind kept circling back to the note. Who were they? What did they know? The next day, my phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. "Did you enjoy the surprise?" My blood ran cold. How did they get my number? I hadn't used it for anything related to the order. I immediately blocked the number, hoping that would be the end of it. But the messages didn't stop. They kept coming, from different numbers, all anonymous, each one more unsettling than the last. "We're watching. Don't worry. We'll find something you like. You can't hide." Every time my phone buzzed, it was like a jolt of electricity through my spine. I started keeping it on silent, but the unease never left. It wasn't just the messages. It was the feeling that I wasn't alone, like someone was constantly watching me, just out of sight. That night, As I lay in bed, I heard something outside my window. A soft tap, then the sound of footsteps retreating. My pulse quickened. I ran to the window, pulling the curtain aside, but no one was there. Still, I couldn't shake the sensation that someone had been watching me. I checked the locks on my doors and windows twice before forcing myself to go back to bed. I didn't sleep much. The next morning, I woke up to something far worse. A new message, but this time, it wasn't just words. There was a photo attached. It was a picture of me, taken the night before, through my bedroom window. In the photo, I was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, oblivious to the fact that someone was standing outside, watching. I stared at the photo in disbelief, my stomach twisting into knots. My first instinct was to call the police, but what would I tell them? That I'd bought something off the dark web and was being stalked? They'd think I was insane. Instead, I did what any reasonable person would do. I packed my bags and went to stay with a friend. I told him I was having trouble with a neighbor, left out the darker details. He didn't ask too many questions, which was a relief. For a while, things seemed calm. The messages stopped, and I started to feel like I could breathe again. But I was wrong. A week passed without incident. I thought maybe I'd escaped whatever nightmare I had stumbled into. But then, the messages started again. "We found you." They had tracked me to my friend's place. I couldn't believe it. I hadn't told anyone where I was going. I hadn't even brought my phone with me, fearing they were tracking it somehow. How did they know? That night, I woke up to the sound of footsteps in the hallway outside my room. Soft, deliberate, like someone was pacing just outside the door. My heart pounded in my chest as I listened, frozen in place. Then came the knock. 3 slow, deliberate taps. I held my breath, praying it was a dream, but the sound was all too real. I sat up, my eyes darting to the door. The footsteps continued, moving closer. Whoever it was, they were in the house. I grabbed my phone and texted my friend in a panic, but there was no response. The footsteps stopped just outside my door. I waited, barely breathing. Then, the knob turned, slowly, deliberately. I threw myself against the door, locking it just in time. There was no more sound after that. No footsteps, no knocking. But I didn't sleep. I stayed pressed against the door until morning. When the sun finally came up, I grabbed my things and left without saying a word. My friend wouldn't understand, and I couldn't put him in danger any longer. I had to end this. Somehow, I had to make it stop. I went back home, the last place I wanted to be, but the only place where I had a chance to figure out what was happening. When I got there, my front door was slightly ajar. My stomach sank. I hadn't left it open. I stepped inside cautiously, every nerve on edge. The house felt colder than usual, like it had been abandoned for years. I crept into the living room, and that's when I saw it. A package sitting on the coffee table. Just like before, no markings, no return address. I swallowed hard, my hands shaking as I opened it. Inside was a note, just like the first one. "We know everything. Stop running." But there was something else this time, a USB drive. I hesitated, then plugged it into my laptop, unsure of what I was about to see. The screen flickered, and a video started playing. It was footage of me, from weeks ago, sitting at my computer, browsing the dark web. It showed everything. My purchase, my emails, even my conversations with friends. They had been watching me the whole time. Then the camera shifted. The footage wasn't just from my computer. It was inside my house, showing me in every room, doing the most mundane things, eating, sleeping, even brushing my teeth. The realization hit me like a freight train. They had cameras in my house. I ripped the USB from my laptop and threw it across the room, my breath coming in short, panicked bursts. I wasn't just being stalked, I was being hunted. I tried to leave, but every step I took felt like it was being tracked. Everywhere I went, they knew. Every move, every decision, they anticipated it before I could act. The messages became more specific, more threatening. You can't hide. We know where you are. It's too late. I went to the police, finally. But when I explained what was happening, they didn't believe me. They chalked it up to paranoia or an elaborate prank. No one took me seriously. By the time I left the station, I was more alone than ever. That night, I barricaded myself in my room, my heart pounding with every creak of the house. The final message came around midnight. We're coming. There was no escape. I could feel it. The end closing in. And now I'm waiting, listening for the footsteps, knowing that when the knock comes, it will be the last sound I ever hear. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening. If you enjoyed what you've heard and want to hear more, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. It really helps the channel grow, and I truly appreciate your support.